Well, good afternoon, folks, and welcome back to the farm. It is 17 shades of miserable outside right now. In fact, we're on a special weather statement today. We're supposed to get about 8 inches of snow between now and tomorrow sometime. And to top it all off, I got my bingo shoes on because I left my rubber boots sitting right there and they all filled up with snow. Well, my other boots are there too, but I can only fit one pair at a time on the boot dryer, so I guess I better get chores done before this gets too deep. But the other thing I got to get done today, if you'll recall, I made some hay feeders out of IBC totes. I made one for here and one for on the other side of the shop. But I don't have anything for the young lambs, and I don't really want to feed them on the ground because, well, if you're going to feed them where they poop, you can expect for them to not do very well. And you can expect for them to waste an awful lot of hay. And I certainly don't have a lot of hay to waste this year. But we do have an old hay feeder we picked up for $50 out by Woking there earlier this year. We're going to bring it in the shop and see if we can't do some fancy fabrication. So this is the old hay feeder here, and I don't know if Buddy was using it to feed llamas or miniature ponies or donkeys or whatever it was, but the bottom of this is just a little bit too tall, as you can probably tell. For the sheep, they need something that's probably closer to 8 to 10 inches off the ground, not 2 feet off the ground. So what I'm going to do is get the big tractor fired up. We're going to get the forks in here, pick this thing up, haul it over to the shop, and we're going to trim these legs down a little bit, and then we'll take it out to the lambs and stock them up with hay. The other thing I got to do is I got to top up all the molasses feeders here today. They're going through an awful lot more this year than they were last year. Am I concerned about that? Well, not really, because the one thing I noticed is they didn't eat anything in regards to molasses over the course of summer. So they won't just lick it up because they're greedy. They're only going to lick up whatever they need because it has all the salt and mineral and everything. It's not like it's just molasses. It doesn't even taste like molasses. In fact, it tastes kind of like a weird vinaigrette. But anyways, it's not like they're just going greedy guts to town on it. What they're actually doing is that they need it, right? Because we do have some older hay. We have last year's hay that we're feeding, and it's perfectly, understandable that they're supplementing as their bodies need it with the mineral supplement. So now yesterday was a big day. In fact, you might recall the giant box of pig fat in the freezer that we got back from our pigs. Well, yesterday we rendered our own lard, and I'm pretty excited about this because lots of pastries, lots of baking, lots of cooking can be done with this. And so we've put it in the fridge freezer here because, well, the internet tells me I can keep that stuff in the fridge for 6 months, but if I keep it in the freezer, I can keep it for 2 years. So always want to be prepared. You never know when you're going to need some of that stuff. So keep a secret stash. I got 3 jars there, but the reality is this whole box is still full of pork fat that I've got to chop up and actually dice up and render down. The big thing I learned there is that when they say dice it up small, I chopped it into about 1-inch cubes, and it took about 4 hours actually to render down, which is a little longer than I expected it to be. But we're in the slow cooker. We're using the slow cooker, and that's what everybody said is just go nice and slow and just keep stirring it. And all in all, it actually came out a fantastic product. In fact, I cooked my eggs in it for breakfast this morning, and they were delicious. So there's a win. So I just got to wait for the battery to charge on the tractor. So I'm going to run over some wood shavings to the chicken house, clean out the nesting boxes, add some more wood shavings to the coop. Yesterday I stopped by Foster Seed and Feed and picked up 2 bags of grit and 4 bags of wood shavings. I wasn't expecting it to snow all this bunch, so unfortunately my bags of grit, hopefully it's not too wet, but we'll get this stuff moved over to the coop here. So what I got here on my shoulder is a bag of grit. Now grit and oyster shell are not the same thing. They're not created equally. Oyster shell is for calcium and it will actually dissolve in the chicken's stomach, whereas grit, colloquially referred to as rooster teeth, essentially is what goes in their gizzard and helps them grind up their food so they can digest it. So 2 very, very different things, but this stuff is the grit portion of it. Super important, especially in the winter. because, well, I mean, the chickens year-round would have access to the outdoors. The summertime, they can peck and get dirt and little bits of gravel out of the driveway. The wintertime, all they get is snow and ice. And so how are they supposed to digest their food? Well, we give them this grit. It makes a world of difference. So the grit we feed is this number 2 grit. And you can see it's quite fine. All right, the chickens have no problems at all picking that up. And that's what essentially what goes in their gizzard and helps them grind up all the grain and stuff that maybe is a little bit harder than perhaps they'd like. Now in the summertime we can ferment the food, and that, you know, makes it a lot easier. They don't need this as much, but in the wintertime fermented feed has a habit of freezing solid. So we generally don't ferment feed at all in the wintertime. It's also time to fill up our no-freeze chicken water. It's got this thing all wrapped in heat trace and insulated. Just filling it off with the garden hose. Maybe you're wondering why. How does it look like this outside? And we keep the garden hose defrosted. So I always keep one garden hose off the shop there. I got one outside tap right there. And it's straight downhill. And it's only gravity that allows us to keep that defrosted, because when I'm done, shut the tap off, everything drains down. And on a real cold day, when it's minus 25 or colder, the outside tap does actually freeze. But later in the afternoon, when the sun comes out, beats on the side of that shop, usually the tap will defrost. So early evening, late afternoon, I can usually always get water out of that garden hose all year long. Now when I'm done, I put the lid back on. You see I just tuck the power cord right in the top of the lid. It fits just perfect in there. Keeps it out of the snow and the ice. Stops anything from short circuiting out here. Works awesome. One thing I always got to be mindful of though is with this garden hose, runs all the way down here and out past the round bale and out to the chicken house, is when I'm forking hay over to the sheep. It happened a couple times last year actually, where I take a step over and I inadvertently step on the frozen garden hose with just a light little skiff of snow on top of it. And before you know it, you're doing dances with snowflakes, and a little less graceful than perhaps you want to be. But yeah, you just always got to remember where the garden hose is going. Anyways, that battery charger's been on the tractor for 15-20 minutes here by now, so let's go and see if that old girl will start up. We'll get us a hay feeder. Now, I'm not 100% sure how I'm going to be able to grab this thing. The pallet or the bale forks in the front of the tractor are 48 inches apart, so I'm just hoping that the peaked roof that comes off the top of the feeder is wider than 4 feet. I can just pick it up by the roof without flexing or bending anything in an awkward way and wrecking something. If that doesn't work, well, maybe I'll just have to go 1 fork. We'll make it work. Hopefully I don't get stuck in here too. The snow's pretty deep back here. Not perfect, but it's in the air. Well, as fortune would have it, I ended up actually not trimming the legs off this thing. There's actually a big long skid here, and I was figured out, well, okay, well, now I'm going to have to make sure I'm pretty accurate with this and get the skid back on, because I was figuring I could just take the leg off and just weld the leg right beside with whatever kind of a foot plate was there. Not really realizing that was designed the way it was. But it's not the end of the world. Turns out the lambs can actually reach that okay, and well enough that they certainly won't go hungry, that's for sure, and they're only going to get bigger from here. What I did do, however, was trim the roof line a little bit, just because it hung over probably another 10 inches to a foot, and there you can see where the end of the support beam was, so the plywood was actually hanging down, the shingles were coming loose. And it was funny because when I got this thing, like I said, I got it out in Woking. I drove it back in my pickup truck doing 90, 100 kilometers an hour. Never lost a single shingle. Single shingle, that rhymes. Quite the poet am I. Anyways, turned out that once this thing was parked here and sitting, on the homestead in the massive amounts of wind that we get, then the shingles started to peel off. Not at the 90 or 100 kilometer an hour going down the highway, but once it was actually sitting here just on the hillside. So I'm fully expecting a few more of these to peel off. Good afternoon, Elsie. Probably not this time of year now that things are kind of cold and frozen, but I think in the spring I'll have to come by with a
shingle removal tool and just peel them off, and I'll probably just put 2 sheets of tin up and it'll be done. Anyway, seems like it's snack time for the lambs. Might as well be snack time for me. I better go fix up a cup of tea. So I'll let you go for now. I hope you have a fantastic afternoon. We'll see you tomorrow.